Hey guys, your boy Alex here. Why the DNA from the Filipino people, it's so different and so special? We already had some videos on the channel. I'm going to leave it at the end of the video. But this one, you guys said it will explain it all. So I'm curious. You're curious. Let's dive into this. If it's your first time on the channel, welcome. Consider subscribing if you like what you're seeing. And man, not only the DNA, I mean, people from the Philippines are so special in so many skills. And special for me, it's your heart, guys. So, but let's dive into the science.
A woman in a blue medical glove holds a plastic tube up to the light. Inside it, a few milliliters of saliva. She is standing on a dirt path in the Cordillera Central, the mountain spine of northern Luzon, more than 1,000 meters above the Philippine Sea. The village behind her has no cell signal. The nearest paved road is a 2-hour walk down switchbacks carved into volcanic soil. And the man who just gave this sample, an Ibaloy elder with a machete resting against his knee, has no particular reason to believe that his spit is about to rewrite a chapter of human history. But it will.
Whoa.
Because when this sample, and hundreds like it, reach a genomics lab at Uppsala University in Sweden, they will reveal something that nobody in the field of population genetics expected. Not a single migration, not two, not the tidy north-to-south wave that textbooks have been teaching for 3 decades. What shows up in the data is a pattern so layered, so deeply tangled, that one of the lead researchers will later describe the Philippines as a population mosaic without parallel. 5 separate waves of human migration spanning 50,000 years. At least 2, possibly 3 archaic hominin species already present when the first modern humans arrived. DNA from a relative of ours that went extinct during the Pleistocene, carried in the genomes of people alive today at the highest concentration found anywhere on Earth. And all of it invisible until someone finally thought to ask the right communities in the right mountains with the right tools. This is not a story about one discovery. It is a story about what happens when an entire archipelago of 7,641 islands gets treated as a genetic footnote, and what the science looks like when it finally stops doing that. For decades, the genetic history of the Philippines was supposed to be simple. The dominant model went like this. Sometime around 4,000 years ago, Austronesian-speaking farmers left Taiwan, sailed south across the Luzon Strait, reached the Batanes Islands and northern Luzon, and from there spread across the Philippine archipelago and eventually across the entire Pacific. This was the out of Taiwan hypothesis, and it was elegant. One origin, one direction of flow, one cultural package, language, red-slipped pottery, rice agriculture, arriving together, replacing or absorbing whatever small hunter-gatherer populations came before. The linguistic evidence was persuasive. Every single one of the more than 180 living languages spoken across the Philippines falls within the Malayo-Polynesian branch of the Austronesian language family, a tree of roughly 1,200 languages stretching from Madagascar
crap, guys. This
to
is
Rapa
fascinating.
Nui. Every Filipino language sits on the same major branch. No exceptions. Archaeologically, red-slipped pottery and charred rice remains appeared in the Batanes Islands and northern Luzon around 2,200 BC, matching styles and strains from southeastern Taiwan. Everything pointed south from Taiwan. Genetically, the handful of early studies that existed reinforced this picture. The Y chromosome haplogroup O1AM119 showed up at high frequencies in both Taiwanese indigenous groups and Filipino populations. Mitochondrial lineages tracked similar paths. A 2008 Genographic Project survey from National Geographic broke Filipino ancestry down into tidy continental percentages. 54% Southeast Asian and Oceanian, 36% East Asian, 5% Southern European, 3% South Asian, 2% Native American.
Wow.
Clean categories. smooth pie charts. A genome that looked like it could be explained in a single paragraph. It looked settled. The Philippines was a way station, a corridor, a place the Austronesians passed through on their way to Polynesia and beyond. Important, yes, but uncomplicated. A stepping stone with a straightforward origin story. That assessment held for roughly 3 decades. The problem is that the story was built on the people who were easiest to reach. Nearly all early genetic sampling in the Philippines drew from lowland, urban, accessible
But
populations.
what happened when you go into the
Cebuanos,
mountains and take a
Ilocanos,
different kind of DNA?
Tagalogs in metropolitan Manila. These were the kinds of communities where a foreign research team could fly in, collect blood draws at a hospital or university clinic, and fly out within a week. What nobody had, or at least nobody had at meaningful scale, was genomic data from the communities that had been on these islands the longest. The mountain peoples of the Cordillera, the Negrito groups of Luzon, the Visayas, Palawan, Mindanao, the Sama-Bajau sea nomads of the Sulu archipelago, who have lived on boats and stilt houses above the water for centuries. These groups that Spanish colonizers, then American administrators, then the Philippine nation-state, then international research teams, had been systematically overlooking because they were the hardest to get to. The mechanism of error here is not one bad assumption. It is a stack of them, each one reinforcing the next, each one invisible to the researchers operating inside the framework. The first layer was sampling bias. Until 2021, the overwhelming majority of Filipino genetic data came from populations that disproportionately represented the most recently arrived ancestry layer, Cordilleran and Austronesian. The oldest genetic layers, the Negrito lineages, the Manobo deep ancestry, the Sama connections to mainland Southeast Asia, were radically undersampled. Imagine trying to reconstruct the geological history of a canyon by scraping only the topsoil. You would conclude that the whole thing was made of loam. The second layer was methodological. Earlier studies relied heavily on mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome markers. These are powerful tools for tracing single lineages, the maternal line or the paternal line. But they cannot see the full picture of admixture, the way 5 separate ancestral populations can overlap and interweave within a single individual's genome. Whole genome analysis, which reads millions of markers simultaneously and can detect exactly how much ancestry comes from which source, was not applied to the Philippines at anything close to meaningful scale until the Lorena study. The third layer was the framework itself. The out-of-Taiwan model was not just a hypothesis. It was the organizing principle that shaped which questions got funded, which fieldwork got approved, which results got published. If your starting assumption is one major migration event carrying language and farming and genes as a single bundle, then you design studies that look for confirmation of exactly that. You do not go looking for 4 other waves that preceded it by tens of thousands of years. You do not ask whether the language and the rice and the pottery and the people might have arrived on different boats, at different times, through entirely different routes. And the fourth layer is the one that is hardest to say out loud. The communities with the deepest genetic heritage in the Philippines, the Aita, the Ati, the Agta, the Mamanwa, were also the most marginalized, the most remote, the most difficult to include in a study. Getting informed consent from Indigenous Cultural Community Councils, coordinating with the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, trekking into villages where no road goes, that takes years of relationship building. It takes Filipino partners with local knowledge and local trust.
Yeah, it's not easy, you know.
The science lagged because the access lagged. And the access lagged because, for a very long time, nobody with funding thought these populations were where the story was. It took Maximilian Lorena to prove them wrong. Lorena is Filipino. He grew up understanding, in a way that most international researchers did not, that the Philippines was not one population, but many. By the mid-2010s, working at Uppsala University under population geneticist Matthias Jakobsen, he began assembling what would become the most comprehensive genomic dataset the Philippines had ever seen. The fieldwork was enormous. 115 indigenous communities, 1,028 individuals, saliva samples collected with origin collection kits, sealed in plastic tubes on mountain paths and coastal outrigger boats, and in village meeting halls with tin roofs. Consent secured from every individual and from indigenous community councils where required, in coordination with the National Commission for Culture and the Arts under Philippine Republic Act 7356. The samples went to Uppsala. The DNA was extracted. 2.3 million markers genotyped per person, then compared against reference panels from East Asia, Australasia, South Asia, Europe. When Lorina's team ran admixture analyses, the results did not match the textbook. If this kind of deep-time population genetics is what brought you here, consider subscribing. We are mapping similar stories across
the original link of this
Asia,
video, which is amazing, it's down below. Go and show some support.
Opens a door we are going to walk through in an upcoming video. What emerged from the data was not one migration. It was 5, arriving from different directions over a span of 50,000 years. The first humans to reach the Philippines were Negritos, and they arrived in 2 separate waves. Northern Negritos entered Luzon. Southern Negritos reached the Visayas and Mindanao. These groups diverged from a shared ancestral Australasian population approximately 46,000 years ago, a date that predates even the genetic split between Aboriginal Australians and Papuans, which occurred around 25,000 years ago.
Jesus, man.
The first Filipinos were cousins of the first Australians, and they got there first. After the Negritos came 2 additional waves of basal East Asian-related populations. Manobo-related groups moved into the southern Philippines. Sama-related populations, carrying genetic affinities with Austroasiatic-speaking mainland groups like the Mlabri and Htin of Thailand, settled in the southwestern archipelago. Both movements coincided with the end of the last glacial period, 7 to 15,000 years ago, when rising sea levels drowned the Sunda landmass and severed the land bridges that once connected Borneo, Java, and Sumatra to the Asian mainland.
Do you imagine how old the Philippines is?
Lorina argues, not farming,
and the history
was the engine.
Oh
Only
my God.
last came the Cordilleran-related populations. And here is where the data delivers its sharpest blow to the old model. The ancestors of today's Cordillerans diverged from indigenous Taiwanese peoples at least 8,000 years ago. But paddy rice agriculture did not arrive in the Philippines until approximately 2,500 years ago. That is a gap of 5,500 years. These Cordillerans were not farmers carrying a complete Neolithic toolkit. They came before the rice, before the pottery tradition. The assumption that language, farming, and migration arrived as one package, the core of the out-of-Taiwan hypothesis, does not survive the Cordilleran data. So what does this 5-wave model show? What does it rule out, and what does it imply? What the evidence shows is that Filipino DNA is not a simple spectrum. It is a palimpsest, layer upon layer, each migration adding ancestry without fully erasing what came before. Every ethnic group in the Philippines carries different proportions of these 5 ancestral components, blended in ratios shaped by geography, altitude, island isolation, trade networks, and colonial history. A Cordilleran Bontoc farmer in the mountains of Benguet and a Sama Bajau boat dweller in the Sulu Sea share an archipelago. They share almost nothing in terms of deep genetic ancestry. What it rules out is any single origin model. The oldest admixture dates between Negrito and Cordilleran-related ancestry are scattered across the entire archipelago, not arranged in the neat north-to-south gradient the out-of-Taiwan model predicts. The pattern is not a single wave rolling down a coastline. It is a convergence from multiple directions over multiple millennia, and what it implies goes beyond genetics entirely. Despite 5 genetically distinct origin populations, every group speaks a Malayo-Polynesian language. 5 genetic stories. 1. Linguistic story. That dissonance suggests that later Austronesian-speaking migrants did not merely add their genes, they replaced entire language systems, overwriting the tongues of populations that had been speaking something else for 40,000 years. Except the replacement was not total. Some Negrito languages still contain words that match no known Austronesian root. Orphan words from orphan languages, carried in the mouths of people whose genomes remember what their vocabularies forgot. But the genetic layers go even deeper than the first Negritos. Much deeper. In 2019, Florent Detroit of the Musée de l'Homme in Paris, together with Filipino archaeologist Armand Mijares, published in Nature a description of 13 hominin fossils recovered from Callao Cave in northern Luzon. The story of the dig itself matters. Mijares first excavated the cave in 2003, found evidence of human activity dating back 25,000 years, and stopped.
25,000.
The deposits seemed exhausted. He walked away. Then, in 2004, Homo floresiensis was announced on the island of Flores in Indonesia. A tiny hominin on a remote island, alive until 60,000 years ago. The implications hit every archaeologist working in island Southeast Asia at once. If Flores had its own species, why not Luzon? Mijares went back to Callao Cave in 2007. This time he dug deeper, down to about 2.5 meters. And there, in a layer filled with Philippine deer bones, his team found a single foot bone.
Yeah, I know the story about this
at
bone.
the Australian National University, who confirmed it was human. It was dated to 67,000 years ago, making it the oldest direct evidence of a human presence in the Philippines.
67,
But which species?
I mean, it's
Nobody can say
mind-blowing.
from one bone. Further excavations in 2011 and 2015 produced 12 more specimens: teeth, finger bones, toe bones, a juvenile femur shaft, at least 3 individuals. And the features were wrong for modern humans. The teeth were the smallest of any Homo species ever described. The premolars had 3 roots, a feature seen in Homo erectus and, eerily, in Australopithecus, a genus that last walked the earth in Africa 2 million years ago. The toe bones were longitudinally curved, hinting at possible tree climbing ability. One finger bone had a curvature unlike anything in the Homo fossil record. It was a mosaic. Modern traits and ancient ones scrambled together in combinations that no existing evolutionary model had predicted. Detroit's team named the species Homo luzonensis. A 2023 dating study revised the age estimate dramatically, approximately 134,000 years, more than double the original figure. And here is the fact that makes Homo luzonensis so disorienting. Luzon has not been connected to the Asian mainland at any point in the last 2.5 million years. Whatever this species was, its ancestors crossed open ocean to get there.
How?
Using what? We have no idea. The water gap at its narrowest was still several miles across, even at the lowest sea levels of the Pleistocene. Something related to Homo erectus, or something even more ancient, built or stumbled onto a vessel capable of crossing deep water. And it arrived on Luzon over 100,000 years before any modern human did. Then came the Denisovan data. From the same comprehensive genomic study, Lorena's team extracted archaic DNA signatures across all 118 sampled groups. What they found redefined the field. The Aita Magbucon, a Negrito community on the Bataan Peninsula, carry approximately 5%
5%.
Denisovan DNA. That is 30 to 40% more than Papuan Highlanders, who had held the global record. When Lorena's team mathematically masked the recent East Asian admixture that dilutes archaic signals, the Aita Magbucon's Denisovan ancestry rose to 46% higher than any Australian or Papuan population. The team's conclusion: there was a distinct Denisovan population living in the Philippines, not the same Denisovans whose finger bone was found in a Siberian cave in 2010, not the same population that interbred with the ancestors of Papuans somewhere in New Guinea, a separate group, an islander Denisovan population, resident on these islands before any Homo sapiens arrived.
Guys, I need a minute over here because it's so mind-boggling, and I mean, I'm thinking about the history that the Philippines has. It's outstanding, mind-blowing, and we're still learning, keep finding all these things. And you said they said at some point, okay, 67,000 years ago, which is a lot, but now, it's double that. So, holy crap.
And the Atamagbukan, who kept to themselves for millennia while other groups mixed with incoming migrants, preserved that archaic genetic signature more completely than any other living humans. Now layer the Denisovan data onto Homo luzonensis. Two independent lines of evidence, one from fossils and one from living genomes, both pointing to the same conclusion. Before modern humans reached the Philippines, there were already multiple archaic hominin species on these islands, and the first modern Filipinos did not simply replace them. They interbred with them, absorbed their DNA, still carry it today. The debates are real, and they cut in multiple directions. Some paleoanthropologists resist calling Homo luzonensis a separate species based on just 13 fragmentary bones and teeth. The holotype specimen CCH6 is a set of heavily worn upper jaw teeth, and some researchers find that too thin a basis for a new species designation. No DNA has been extractable in the tropical humidity of Callao Cave, which means Homo luzonensis sits in a taxonomic limbo that only more fossils or a breakthrough in ancient protein analysis could resolve. Maria Martinon Torres, director of Spain's National Research Center on Human Evolution, has noted the combination of features is unprecedented. But unprecedented is not the same as settled. On the genetic side, others argue the migration model may be too discrete, too clean. Real migration is messy. Gene flow between the Philippines and surrounding regions was probably more continuous and bidirectional than neat pulses suggest. The Lorena study itself acknowledges that the oldest admixture dates between Negritos and Cordilleran-related groups do not follow a clean north-to-south gradient, which means the migration model is still a simplification of something even more complex. There is also a countermodel, the out-of-Sundaland hypothesis, which proposes south-to-north population movements driven by the flooding of the Sunda Shelf during the Holocene. The Lorena data does not fully resolve this debate. It complicates both models. And the ethics of the research itself have drawn scrutiny. At least one academic commentary noted concerns about whether full ethics clearances from all relevant indigenous authorities were properly obtained during the initial fieldwork. In a country with more than 100 indigenous peoples, each with distinct governance structures and cultural protocols, the logistics of ethical sampling are not trivial. They are foundational. These are real tensions. They are not resolved. But even the skeptics do not dispute the central conclusion. The Philippines contains one of the most layered, most complex genetic architectures of any population on Earth. 5 major migration waves spanning 50,000 years. At least 2 archaic hominin species present when the first modern humans arrived. Denisovan ancestry at a global maximum. South Asian gene flow from Indian Ocean trading networks reaching the Sama communities of southwestern Mindanao, starting approximately 1,000 years ago. A 10 to 20% South Asian contribution to Cebuano ancestry, dating to a period when pre-colonial Cebu practiced Hinduism. A trace of Spanish colonial DNA, less than 1%, after 330 years of occupation. Compare that to Latin America, where Spanish colonialism left genetic signatures of 20 to 60% in many populations. The Philippines absorbed the colonial language, the religion, the surnames. But the genome barely flinched, and beneath all of it, languages that preserve the memory of only one migration, while the genome preserves all 5. Except for those ghost words. Those orphan lexical items in Negrito languages that linguist Lawrence Reed has documented, words with no Austronesian etymology at all, possible fragments of languages that were spoken on these islands for tens of thousands of years before Austronesian ever arrived. They survive in a handful of consonant clusters and root morphemes. Everything else from those original languages is gone.
Oh.
Ghost words and Negrito remain as echoes of a lost past. There are over 10 million Filipinos living outside the Philippines right now, in hospitals in Riyadh, on cargo ships crossing the Pacific,
Which I have a lot of respect
care
for you
homes
guys
in
out
London,
there.
in engineering firms in Dubai, and nursing programs in Toronto, and restaurant kitchens in every major city in the world. They are one of the largest diaspora populations on Earth, and every one of them carries, somewhere in the 3 billion base pairs of their genome, a record that reaches back not thousands, but tens of thousands of years. Denisovan sequences inherited from a species that no longer exists. Negrito lineages older than the colonization of Australia. Cordilleran markers that contradict the most widely taught model of Pacific migration. South Asian echoes from medieval Indian Ocean trade. 5 waves of human movement across 50,000 years, compressed into a single strand of DNA, walking through an airport terminal, unremarked, uncelebrated, unread. The largest genomic study of the Philippines was published in 2021. The human genome was first sequenced in 2003. The tools to read this story have existed for less than a generation. We are standing at the beginning of a very long investigation, holding a plastic tube of saliva up to the light, and we have barely turned the first page.
Barely turned the first page. You imagine, guys, how many things are still to be discovered about the Philippines, about the history, about how old it is. This was fascinating. Like I was saying, the original link is down below. Amazing job to this channel that provided this. And this is, for me, it's amazing. I hope for you as well, because we managed to learn not only about the history of the present day of the Philippines, but as well, this past, forgotten past. And it's wow. I mean, think about it right now. You're a Filipino. It doesn't matter if you're watching from the Philippines or whatever place in this world. Do you imagine what kind of DNA you have inside you? How old it is? And you should be proud of that. Man, wow, fascinating. And I hope we're going to have more of this. I'm going to leave here the documentary that we did, why the Filipino are so different from other Asian countries. And I think you should want to watch that as well, because there's some little things interesting over there. But this one was, wow, I mean, I never expected that. So old, thousands of years ago, guys, we're talking about. Jeez, maybe the oldest population in the world. And crazy. Anyways, the video is already too long. Thank you for being here. Let me know your thoughts down below. What do you think we should see next? Like, subscribe, share, and like I always say, till next time, stay safe.